Good day, runners. This is Coach Peter Pimm for the week of June 17th, 2013. And thanks to sponsor DeadSoundRevival.com for this week's opening tune choice. If you enjoy alternative, like me, then go to DeadSoundRevival.com, where words fail and music speaks, for the coolest music picks that you may not hear on mainstream radio. So, hope your training's going well, and as per last week's audio, I hope you've been sleeping soundly, that is, training soundly. I've had a good week between watching the Stanley Cup playoffs and the NBA Finals. Congrats, Miami. I think I risked my life in some bars cheering for Miami, but anyway. On the running front, I'm proud to say that last Saturday, one of my young track athletes, 19-year-old Kyle Grief, competed in a track meet in Indianapolis, and he ran 3:44.64 for 1,500 meters. They call the 1,500 the metric mile. It's actually about 106 meters short of a full mile, but it's about the equivalent of a 4:02.5 mile. So, pretty happy about that. What else? Oh, geez, of course. I'm really excited about this. The official trailer for the movie Bog Milk a Bog came out this week, and it's being posted on YouTube. You can go to my Twitter for the link. It's about 3.5 minutes long, and at the 2:20 point, let me check. The 2:20 point in the video, there's a shot of one of the many races we choreographed, and you can see 3 of the 12 Canadian lads I recruited for the movie in action. It's a track race in progress. In lane 1, there's Trent Sayers of Western University. In lane 2, Wesley Huff of York University. And in lane 5, Matt Muldoon. The look of the film looks really cool. And the movie is being released July 12th. I'm trying to find out if it's going to be released in North America around the same time, or hopefully at some point. I'll see if I can find out and let you know by next week. Just talking about it makes me feel like a Merg Vindaloo. Okay, let's get to this week's audio topic. I'm often asked, what is my coaching philosophy? Fair enough, I'm going to tell you. But before I do, I want to tell you what my influences have been along the way. I think my first influence was I was a loser. That's right, a loser. When I was 15 years old, my dad drove me to Hamilton, Ontario to compete at the National Steel Car races. And at the time, those were that was one of the most significant spring events. This is back in the mid-'60s. And it's also around the time that the very first Tim Hortons store was established in 1964 in Hamilton. Did you know that? And now there's about 3,000 of the addictive franchises. Anyway, I finished over a minute behind the winner, Ken Hamilton, in the junior 1.5 mile race. Hamilton, who was my age, well, I guess he still is, was a really outstanding high school cross-country champion. I always joke that I became the president of his fan club. So after the race, we're driving home, and my dad asked me, how could I have finished so far behind Hamilton? Of course, my dad didn't have an appreciation of running and what it takes, sort of like many of our non-runner friends who give you that glazed deer in the headlights look when you start talking about your weekend road races and your times. Huh? Well, I told him it was my genetics. Yeah, my genetics. You and Mom didn't combine to give me enough firepower. Okay, I didn't say that. Hell, I didn't even know what genetics was or were. Yeah, Dad, it's my genome. I just said I don't know, and I didn't. I eventually did find out part of the reason. My training at the time was something like 3 3-mile runs per week. And I discovered or heard that Hamilton was doing up to 10-mile runs in intervals, and so I wasn't anywhere near the league. By the way, I finally beat Hamilton in a meet about 6 years later in an indoor 3K race, which is one of the highlights of my career. I never did beat him again, and I still consider myself the president of his fan club. Guy was awesome. Great guy, too. So, my first big influence was I was a loser. And here's why. Because being a competitive sort of dude caused me to look for answers and try to make sense of my race results. So, putting on my nerd hat, I hit the Richview Public Library. Is the library still there, Peter? Yes, it wasn't built by the Mayans, and it's still in operation. Anyway, I came across a book, The Herb Elliott Story. I don't think it's in print anymore, but holy smokes, it was a great book. Elliott was an Australian who at age 23 won the 1960 Olympic 1500 meter gold medal in Rome, and it was a world record at the time. He retired shortly thereafter because back in those days, not much financial incentive to continue on. And the book really inspired me, and it led me to read another book that was in the library, and it was called Middle Distance Running, and it was by his coach, Elliott's coach, Percy Cerruti. Now, Cerruti was like legendary and apparently rather eccentric, but he was really holistic in his approach, preaching the necessity of incorporating other forms of training and attention to diet and mental outlook. By the way, you can see Herb Elliott and Percy Cerruti on YouTube videos taped over 50 years ago. The one about Cerruti is really cool. If you haven't already seen it, you're in for a real treat. It's in French, but you can hear him talking in the background, and it opens up with this craggy, bare-chested Cerruti, who kind of resembles Ed Whitlock, come to think of it. He's running around in circles on a grassy park in bare feet. Yes, bare feet, people, on grass. New idea. And goes on to show him weight training and doing planks and sit-ups and running on the sand dune hills in Portsea, Australia. So, Cerruti and his approach and thinking, which was really modern day, very similar to what we think about these days, led me to think holistically, led me to think holistically. To be successful, you had to do more than just run around in circles on a track or on the road. He definitely thought out of the box in that time. As for my next major influence, that would be the Toronto Rehabilitation Center. When I was doing my grad work, I volunteered to work at the Toronto Rehab Center's program with cardiac patients. It was under the leadership of Dr. Terry Kavanagh, the world-renowned cardiac rehabilitation specialist, and he, along with other scientists, were spearheading this study. The study was aiming at determining the impact of endurance walking and running on the incidence and severity of subsequent heart attacks. Did you say subsequent heart attacks, Peter? Yes, I did. Get this, a prerequisite of being a member of this study was you had to have a cardiac arrest. Now that's a tough membership criteria for eligibility. So once a week I would monitor the patients at the rehab center's track, where they did their own individually prescribed workouts based on their stress test results. So they knew what heart range these folks should be exercising in. So very sophisticated. They would walk and run around a 200-meter asphalt track, and they had to stick to a specified pace that was determined by their heart rates. So a workout prescription might be something like 3 miles at a heart rate of 130 beats per minute. Now, this is before the introduction of handy heart rate monitors and Garmin's. Instead, they were taught to measure their pulse rates by putting their fingers over the carotid artery on the neck and counting. Now, this experience had a major influence on my thinking. It really drove home the point that every individual is unique and therefore should ideally be treated uniquely. And here's one last major influence. That's been my quantifying the interrelationships between the different running distances and the associated interval workouts. Now, I spoke about this in my audio for the week of May 13th, but an example of what I'm talking about is that if you wanted to run a 3-hour marathon, you also need to be able to go about 38:45 for 10 kilometers. If you can't do that, you can run as much as you want, but you're still not going to be able to hit the target of 3 hours. Now, knowing in advance what is required at other distances, other than perhaps the one that you're most interested in, can really help immensely in designing the most effective training program. Okay, so as far as my training philosophy is concerned, when I begin work with a new client, whether it's a grade 10, 16-year-old or a 70-year-old, I design a program that, along with their desired goals, takes into consideration many factors. Factors like their age. A 12-year-old or a 16-year-old is still in growth zone, and beyond that. their current and past volume of running, their basic speed, their running form, their biomechanics, their available facilities, their past racing performances, previous injuries, and the number of workout sessions that they can commit to. So like there's a whole load of factors that have to be taken into consideration. And this naturally means the frequency and percentages and actual amounts of the various forms of training will vary greatly between clients in order to come up with what I think is the best recipe to get the job done. And by various forms of training, I mean running drills, straight runs or hills or weights, cross training or biking or elliptical, pool running, mobility drills, intervals. I use any and all of these depending on who I'm dealing with. Obviously, a 10K program designed for Usain Bolt would vastly differ from one designed for Forrest Gump. It's sort of like a sound producer adjusting his graphics equalizer. And speaking of sound, I think I've sounded off long enough for this week. So that's it for now. See you on the roads.